Oh, look. We have a Cracker Cat. Yep, Cracker Cat is most definitely getting comfortable for the night. Alrighty, we are going to look at this quilt top and see what we can do to make it look good. Now, I do want it bigger than what it is, so what I'm going to do is put 2, 3, and 4. Now, I want to put a strip in between them so that we can make it bigger. And then I'm going to have to come up with whatever I need over here and here to make it go with this. Alright, so let's see if we can't get started on this. Alrighty, I need to wipe my mat off. Maybe. What? God. Somebody been playing over there because it ain't where it was. Alrighty. So, now, what I want to do is figure out what I want in between these two. So I think that's a pretty good, so, okay, about 5 inches in between. Because I want a bigger quilt than what it is. And I think I'm going to name it Log Cabin Houses. Because if you look at it, we'll have a road here, and then on down with other roses, but it'll be 2, 3, and 4. So now, I think I'm gonna want my other cutter. Alrighty, I think that this right here will look good in between them. So, let's see if we can't, and I hope I have enough to do this with. And I'm going to have to kind of like line it up. So I'm going to line it up with the line up here. And then cut it down some. I'm going to cut it down to here. If I can see what I'm doing. 148. And then that way I can put this right here in my other stuff to make use it for scrap. There we go. Now I'll have me some scrap. Alright, now I want to go 5 down. Let's see. Okay, there's 5. And I'm going to make me 3 of them at 5. And I'm not going to worry about if it's too much or not enough. Because I can always make me some blocks out of them. And then we'll come back and we'll see what we want to put in between the other way. I want to try to make it a bigger quilt and not a small quilt. Alright. So, now, let's see what we can do about sewing these down. We're going to have 2, and then we're going to have 3, and then we're going to have 4.
The Ark of the Covenant is a secret gold-covered object known to the Jews, Christians, and also the Muslims. It has also been made known to a wider audience by being depicted in various movies. But what is the Ark of the Covenant? The oldest text written about it is the Torah, found in the Jewish Tanakh and in the Old Testament of the Bible. It tells us about the supreme God, the one who claimed to be the creator of planet Earth. He wrote 10 laws on 2 tables of stone. These stones were then placed into a gold-covered chest. The chest itself was then closed with a seat or lid with 2 cherubims, one on each side of the lid. The ark was used for 2 different purposes. It was above this seat the creator of the earth would manifest himself, as the law and the ark functioned as a throne for the creator. Secondly, it was put into a sanctuary system along with other holy objects. No one was allowed to enter the room that housed the ark, except once every year, where a high priest brought blood into the room and placed the blood in front of the ark and on the seat of the ark. This signified how the people's transgressions against the law in the ark had been brought to justice, by a substitute's blood being brought before the throne. It was later moved to the first temple in Jerusalem. Sometime before the Babylonians besieged the city and destroyed the temple, it is assumed that it was hidden or that it disappeared. Since then, many scholars, theologians, historians, and archaeologists have wondered what had happened to it, or if it had even existed. Was it a fact or was it a myth? No one was allowed to touch the ark. On more than one occasion, those who violated this law were struck dead. It also followed the Israelites into war. When it was captured by enemies, they were struck by plagues until they returned it to its guardians. It was thought to have magical powers. Over many years, there have been many ark hunters looking for the Ark of the Covenant, or trying to understand the significance of the ark. Many have made replicas of it. More than one have claimed to have discovered it, but so far no one has brought evidence of their findings so they could be examined. But one claim was to stand out from all the others in a very special and heart-wrenching way. The disappearance of the ark has been a mystery for a very long time. All the sources mentioning its hiding place were written long after its disappearance, and is clearly based on either legends or even guesswork. The last time it was mentioned in the Bible was when King Josiah ordered it to be placed back into the temple. But we also know that Babylon conquered Jerusalem in Josiah's son's days, well over 35 years later. One interesting thing about this is that there is no mention of the ark, although other items that was taken are mentioned. However, the Book of the Maccabees, that came several hundred years after it went missing, claimed that the ark had been hidden at the mountain where Moses saw the promised land before he died. The Book of Baruch, an even younger book, claimed that God let the earth beneath Jerusalem swallow it up, and that the ark would surface again at the end times. And medieval literature claimed the ark had been taken to Ethiopia, and some 20th century speculation included Egypt and even Ireland. But what the ark is and where it is might actually be connected. The main function of the Ark of the Covenant was to be the governmental seat of God in his earthly temple. But the ark had many assignments outside the sanctuary and wasn't limited to the sacrificial rituals. Both inside and outside the sanctuary system, the ark was used to defend God's right as judge and only true God and King of the whole earth. His claim to this right was written in the law inside the ark, which stated that he was the creator and that the earth, therefore, belonged to him. The God of the Bible said, "The ark of the Lord of all the earth." For all the earth is mine, for the Lord Most High is terrible. He is a great king over all the earth. That is why the ark went in front in the war against the city of Jericho. Even though this city didn't accept him as God, or being the supreme authority on earth, he could still judge and sentence them. Although Nebuchadnezzar, the great leader in Babylon, didn't worship the God of Israel, both he and other kings and great nations in those days were still judged by God. The Assyrians, the Midianites, Canaanites, Egyptians, Ethiopians, Philistines, and many other nations who rejected God as their God was still judged according to God's standard. When the last king of Babylon mocked God and God's temple, he was sentenced by the Lord by the means of a hand writing his judgment on the wall in front of everyone in the room. God shows that no matter what religion or ethnic background you have or belong to, you will be judged according to the standard of the Creator and not by your own moral standard or the moral standard of your specific culture. One of the ark's functions was going before God's people in the wilderness and to lead them to their resting place. It was present when a dispute of authority about whom God's chosen was had to be solved. It went before them out into the Jordan River, so the river miraculously opened up for them, making them able to cross over to the other side. It took part in the confirmation of the covenant between God and Israel at Mount Ebal. And still, when Israel failed God and was conquered by the enemy, and the ark was taken from them, God used the ark to judge the Philistines and humiliate their gods so that they were forced to send it back again. In this situation, God used the ark as a status symbol of his kingship. Even when God didn't protect his backsliding people, he had protected the ark as it represented his authority. This makes it clear that no man needed to protect it and that God would keep it safe all on his own. This also eliminates the possibility of it being destroyed. The ark had been God's throne on earth, and the Bible says, "Thy throne, O God, is forever and ever." While Jeremiah had just witnessed Jerusalem and the temple being destroyed, he had something entirely different to say about God's throne. "Thou, O Lord, remaineth forever, thy throne from generation to generation." So what really happened to it? Jeremiah had been told by God that the city and temple were going to be destroyed. He was prepared, and so were many others. The most natural thing to do was to hide away their most sacred object, the Ark of the Covenant. A prophetic word on the end times in the Bible might have given us a clue as to where the Ark would resurface. "And it shall come to pass in the last days, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, for out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." In the 19th century, archaeology got its beginning when different scholars went looking among the old remains found in the Middle East. From tombs and temples in Egypt to historical records of biblical cities in Mesopotamia and Palestine, the Bible as a historically correct book was evident as ancient cities and nations mentioned there. Ancient writings from other nations confirmed scripture. Until then, even the city of Babylon had been a legend to many people until they recovered its remains. But Jerusalem had been inhabited since the ark disappeared. Many people had just built new buildings on top of the ancient ones. Thus, the old city became layers of history, one after the other. In 1854, a missionary, James Barclay, was walking along the old walls of Jerusalem. Here he stumbles across the entry to a major cave underneath the old city, full of tunnels and openings. It's been closed off for centuries, and it ran the length of 5 city blocks. In 1867, General Sir Charles Warren did the first major excavations in the old city and the mountain the temple once stood on. He discovered shafts and tunnels beneath ground level. In 1873, Charles Clermont-Ganneau, a French Orientalist and archaeologist, discovered a cherub carved on stone inside the cave. Cherubim were commonly used in the ancient times to guard the entry to a sacred town or place. This cherubim had similar features to what was popular in the time the ark disappeared. In 1882, General Gordon, a highly respected officer, traveled in the Middle East, and while looking around in Jerusalem, he was convinced that the traditional place called Golgotha could not be the right place. The northern section of the Temple Mount that was cut off seemed like it fit the biblical description and the ancient layout of the city much better. He started excavations there, but he had to leave to help in a conflict in Sudan, where he died and never got to finish his work. However, he did have time to write a letter to a friend containing a shocking statement. Something had happened that he did not explain. The northern mountain that Gordon identified as Skull Hill was also the location for Jeremiah's cave, where he wrote the Book of Lamentations, the very same book where Jeremiah had said, "God's throne remaineth." Gordon said, "The Ark of the Covenant is there." He also mentioned that other temple furniture could also be found there. A very strange statement, as he never got to finish his excavation. So how had he come to know? Well, the place was left covered up, and General Gordon's letters remained tucked away somewhere safe. About 100 years later, a man by the name of Ronald Wyatt had started praying to God to use him to show the world that the Bible was true. Ron had already been looking into the flood story and investigated the possible remains of Noah's Ark. He was also studying the Israel exodus from Egypt and the location where they could have crossed the sea, finding several old Egyptian chariot wheels. It was on one of the diving trips he ended up traveling by Jerusalem on his way home. He was walking along the cliff face with a new acquaintance when his hand suddenly went up on his own. And his hand pointed to a place where some debris and trash was lying in front of the cliff. Without understanding why or how, he heard himself say, "There is Jeremiah's grotto, and the Ark of the Covenant is there." Ron was confused at what had happened, as he hadn't had such an experience before. He had not even thought of looking for it. Troubled, he went home trying to study and find out if the Ark being there could even be a possibility. He studied the Babylonian siege wall at the time when the Ark was last seen. He tried figuring out when it had to have been removed and also the limitations of both the time and the place to hide it. He absolutely saw the possibility that the Ark could be hidden beneath, somewhere in these tunnel systems. He was convinced that God himself had inspired him to find it. Ronald started excavating with his two sons in the place where his hand had pointed. However, they soon discovered that a large mountain rock made digging downwards difficult. Instead, they started digging a few feet to the right. As they started excavating, he quickly found 3 niches in the cliff face. Ron thought that perhaps they could be niches that were meant to hold signs, coming from the Roman period. After all, Golgotha was close to the main road at the time of Jesus, and this could have been where Jesus was crucified. The well-known quote of Quintilian explains, "Whenever we crucify criminals, very crowded highways are chosen so that many shall see it and may be moved by fear of it, because all punishment does not pertain so much to revenge as to example." The Golgotha location where the Byzantine church was built wasn't by a main highway, but this place was. Could these niches have been used to put signs in that revealed to the people the crimes the criminals had done? He started thinking that this side of the mountain could have been the place where people were crucified. He continued excavating downwards, but the ground underneath was very loose. For this reason, they went back to the original place, hoping that they could dig around the large rock. This time, they discovered that they could excavate down between the cliff and the rock, and that the cliff almost formed a roof as they excavated downwards. While digging downwards, he quickly found what appeared to be a rope hole chiseled into the cliff. He was about to find out what it could have been used for. 38 feet below ground level, they found themselves in what appeared to be a cistern-like structure. It was round with stairs going down into it. Ron wondered if it might have been used to store grain and then later was used as a cistern. He chiseled through the plaster and found a large amount of pottery amongst the dirt and debris used as fill to form the cistern. When he showed these pottery pieces to the antiquities authorities, they examined them and informed Ron that some of them dated all the way back to the Jebusite era. The specimens that were dated to the most recent was from the Roman period. He continued along the cliff face underneath where he had found the niches. Because of the pottery and coins they found, they understood that they were on the Roman level. While digging down, he found many finger bones that confirmed his suspicion that this place was once a place for executions. In addition to crucifixions, stoning was also performed during the Roman Jewish era. Outside the cistern structure that Ron discovered, he found another circular structure on the opposite side. Only a base of the circular structure seemed to be intact. While studying the structure, he found a well-preserved section with a wall and a hewn stone standing horizontally out from the wall in the cliff face. A few feet in front of it, he noticed a square rock that didn't look like a natural-shaped rock. He carefully picked it up and found a squarish hole chiseled into the bedrock underneath. Could this have been a cross hole? As he examined this hole and cleared away the dirt around it, he discovered that it had a large crack extending out from it. It appeared that the hole was chiseled into a platform in the bedrock. In front, on a lower level, he found several other cross holes. But he couldn't get the thought out of his head that the one on the platform with the crack extending out from it could have been the hole that held the cross of Christ. He remembered the scripture saying that an earthquake shook the mountain when Christ died. Could this crack point to the hole holding the cross? The cross hole extended 23 inches into solid bedrock, while the crack appeared to extend much deeper. It is not unlikely that they would have known where Christ was crucified, and he had many followers who would want to turn the site into a place of remembrance. The Golgotha the Catholic Church and Orthodox churches both use was first ordered to be built by Constantine the Great around the year 325 or 326 over the remains of an old pagan temple. This happened many years after Christ was crucified, but these remains that Ron discovered was Roman and could date back shortly after the crucifixion. After year 70 AD, the Jews were either killed or moved, and the city was reduced to a Roman camp. This could mean that the site was no longer used for crucifixions. Ron found coins in the building structure dating back to 135 AD and before, but none after. In 130 AD, the Christians was favored in place of the Jews, and this structure was therefore likely built by Christians at this time or earlier. This means that this was probably the first site that was recognized as the actual Golgotha. The Golgotha that the Byzantine Church was built over, about 200 years later, was constructed when knowledge about these places had been more or less lost. The closer the time were to the crucifixion, the more they would have known about the details of what happened. The fact that the coins Ron found in the ancient building were from 135 AD indicates that whoever built and used this ancient structure apparently abandoned it at the time and left the region. The fact that the foundations are still intact might indicate that it didn't suffer destruction at the hands of invaders, but most likely fell into disuse and decay. Eventually, over time, it was covered in dirt and debris. Whatever was the case, the evidence showed that the structure might have been constructed long before the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Ron and his two sons had worked here over a period of nearly 2 years. They continued looking down at the Roman level for a cave or an entrance to a tunnel, but without any luck. Ron then found himself impressed to break through a crack in the cliff wall. They all prayed and continued to feel impressed. They used hammers and chisels, and after a short time, they could see an open space behind. They enlarged the hole so they could get through. The cave on the inside was 15 feet high and wide. Ron had first gotten excited when discovering the cave, thinking the ark might be right there inside it, but it was empty and led to myriads of shafts and openings inside the mountain. Ron continued to search every cave and opening he could possibly find inside the colossal cave system. For 2 years they went back and forth between the States and Jerusalem to earn money at home so they could come back and continue the search. In December 1981, they continued their work inside the cave system, looking into any opening, crack, or cave they could find. However, all 3 of them ended up with a cold. Ron's 2 sons went back to the States, and Ron had to rely on help from others to continue. He wasn't going to give up and felt God had promised him that he would find the ark on this specific trip. But now he had used all of his money, he was sick, and the work was very hard and exhausting. One of the locals that were helping him went through some of the smaller openings as he was thinner and could get into places Ron couldn't. While looking around, Ron found a chimney-like passage, and from there a small tunnel where Ron had to exhale in order to squeeze himself through. He then noticed a stalactite about 16 inches long in front of the cliff wall. Behind it was a hole, and Ron tried to look through it without any luck. So he enlarged it a little and could see a cave inside, but it didn't look too promising and appeared to be a cave full of rocks, but he was determined to look everywhere. He enlarged the hole enough for his helper to crawl in, but he came quickly out again with a terrified look on his face, crying, "What is in there? What is in there? I'm not going back in there." And then he tried to get out of the cave system as fast as he could. Now Ron realized that there might be something there and enlarged the hole enough for him to squeeze himself in. It was now January the 6th, 1982. There was about 18 inches of clearance between the rocks and the ceiling. Ron started shining his flashlight down through the rocks to see if there was anything underneath. He saw some dry, rotten timbers, and under it some dry, rotten animal skins that turned into powder when he touched it. He then saw something reflecting back, something shiny and golden. At first he thought it could be the Ark of the Covenant, but when removing the animal's skin, he saw a gold veneered table with a raised molding around the side, which consisted of an alternative pattern of a bell and a pomegranate. Ron felt sure this had to be from the first temple, or the missing tabernacle furniture, and could be the original table of showbread. He then started to investigate the chamber more closely and looked around. He used his light and noticed a crack in the ceiling. Climbing closely to the rocks to the rear of the chamber, he saw a stone case right underneath the crack. It had a flat stone top which was cracked in two, and a smaller section moved to the side, creating an opening into the stone case. But the top was too close to the ceiling for him to be able to look inside it. He noticed a black substance in the crack above it, and some more of the black substance on the edge of the lid, leading into the box. The crack in the ceiling was directly above the cracked part of the lid, where it was open, and some of the black substance had to have fallen into the case.
I made a mistake. I'm supposed to put the 2 on the 3 and the 1 on the 2. But I messed up. How in the world I done that? I don't know. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the 3 here, or the 3 here in the middle. Oh, wait a minute. 3 at the top, because it has the longest one. And then we're going to put the 2 here in the middle. I'll get it right in a minute. And then the 4 at the bottom. Since I have got them messed up, sometimes your mistakes look good. But whenever I was trying to take the strips off, I was doing more damage than I was good. So I said, I quit. So, alright. Let's go back to what we were watching.